University of Cincinnati. And today we have a fantastic panel, and the panelists include Dr. Gigi CV, Principal of CET, joining from Trivandrum. And we have Dr. Jayashree PK, a faculty at CET, also joining from Trivandrum. And we have Sunil Cherian from CET Alumni Association North America, joining from Silicon Valley, California. And we have a very distinguished alumni, Ajit Kumar, joining from Pittsburgh. And last but not least, our chief guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Chris Haward, joining from Connecticut, USA. So without further delay, let's get this started. And to start the webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Jayashree PK to give us a brief history of CET. As I mentioned, she's a faculty at CET and also the secretary of CET Alumni Association. And she was one of the driving force behind, putting all these together. So, Dr. Jayashree, please start your presentation.
Thank you, Anu, for inviting me to talk about our alma mater. Respected Principal of CET and President of CETA, Dr. Gigi CV, CET alumnus of 1972 match, Mr. Ajit Kumar, Dr. Chris Haward, Gartner Chief of Research, esteemed alumni of CET, faculty members, and my dear student friends. College of Engineering Trivandrum, CET, was established in 1939 as the first engineering college in the then Travancore state. The first classes were started on 3rd July 1939 during the reign of the Travancore king, Sri Chitra Tirunal Balarama Varma. Major T.H. Matthew Mann, a Britisher, was the first principal of CET. The college had an initial intake of 21 students each for degree and diploma courses in civil, mechanical, and electrical branches. With the establishment of the Directorate of Technical Education in the late 50s, the college administration came under the control of the government of Kerala. Over the years, the intake of students increased in CET. As of now, there are 8 full-fledged departments offering 8 undergraduate, 27 postgraduate, and doctoral programs under the APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. The college has around 4,500 students, 311 teaching staff, and 290 non-teaching staff. Apart from the BTech, the college also offers programs like BArch, MTech, MPlan, MCA, MBA, and PhD. Ever since the inception, CET has maintained its eminence as a leading engineering college in India. According to NIRF ranking, College of Engineering Trivandrum is placed in the 85th position. The college ranks among the top in the country in the quality of its graduates and the number of top jobs held by its graduates. With such an emergence in the academic and curricular activities, the college is the most sought after engineering college by the applicants of engineering degree programs in the state. Being the secretary of CETA, let me also inform you all about the strong alumni association of CET. We call it as CETA, College of Engineering Trivandrum Alumni Association. CETA was started in 1976 by the veterans and eminent alumni, Dr. C.P. Kuriakose, Dr. S. Hariharan, Dr. R. Ravi Kumar, Dr. A. Kulathu Iyer, Dr. K.P.P. Pillai, and Dr. J. Inayatullah. CETA has grown ever since, and now it has more than 47,000 members holding key positions in different parts of the world. As of now, CETA has 20 chapters across the globe. CET is indeed proud of its alumni and their achievements. The alumni can be considered as the fourth pillar of CET, providing external support for the smooth and efficient functioning of CET. That's all about CET and CETA. Thank you, and over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Dr. Jayashree, for reminding us of the storied and proud history of CET. Now, our fearless captain of CET, Principal Dr. Gigi Sir, will talk about the journey towards this webinar series and what lies ahead. Dr. Gigi has been with CET since 1991. He received his BTech in Electronics and Communication from TKM College of Engineering, and he received his MTech and PhD from IIT Mumbai. Gigi Sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Anu, for the warm and generous introduction. Our chief guest and keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Chris Haward, 1972 alumnus of CET, Mr. Ajit Kumar, members of our alumni, faculty members, my dear students and friends. On behalf of CET, I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you. As all of you know, CET has a rich history of imparting quality engineering education in the country and inspiring many young minds over the last 81 years. We pride ourselves as a driving force behind the success of many regional, national, and international companies, research institutions, various government organizations, etc., to the exceptional technical minds nurtured by our institution. In order to enter into CET, the students have to undergo a very competitive entrance examination written by more than 75,000 students every year, and the top 1% only get admitted to CET. Being a state government funded institution, education in CET is almost free or charges a very nominal fee. More than 50% of our students are supported with various scholarships from the government and also from our alumni. Historically, CET has been well known as the #1 engineering college in the state of Kerala. Presently, ours is the only engineering college under the Kerala Technological University ranked by the national ranking agency NIRF as one among the top 100 engineering colleges of our country. Please note that there are more than 4,000 engineering colleges in our country. Over the last several years, our students have gone far and wide and climbed the pinnacles of corporate careers and entrepreneurship, and also academics and research everywhere in the globe. Many dedicated and hardworking teachers have immensely contributed for the development of this institution and its students. Over the last many years, our focus was on undergraduate education. We are now widening our horizon to include the much needed thrust area of research and innovation. We realize that research plays an important role in the economic development of our country and is essential for facilitating outstanding student education and training. Research is the foundation for knowledge, which makes possible the vast sea of innovation and application, providing wider benefits to the society. Today's economies are mainly driven by technology and innovation, and a research-intensive education system focusing on quality and impactful research is the only way to further this progress. In CET, apart from undergraduate education, we give a lot of importance for postgraduate education as well. And at present, our engineering postgraduate intake is 486 students every year. More than 25% of our faculty members are research guides, and we have more than 300 PhD students in our campus. Thus, we need to have more activities to promote research and entrepreneurship in our campus, enabling our faculty to take up more funded research projects and producing more quality publications and patents. Our worldwide alumni have risen up to meet this challenge and helped create several initiatives, which includes collaboration with the world-class universities and companies, cutting-edge startups, working on research grants, as well as faculty and student exchange programs. This distinguished alumni researcher webinar series we are inaugurating today is the initiative by CET alumni for bringing awareness to students and faculty members of CET about the recent trends in the engineering market, research, and industry, and hence the name Inspire CET. I put on records the sincere efforts taken by our committed alumni in this regard. As part of Inspire CET, we will bring in world-class researchers and thus expose CET students and faculty and inspire them to come out with research-driven innovations for the benefits of the society. I'm very much thankful to Dr. Chris Haward and Mr. Ajit Kumar for joining us today. I sincerely hope that all our alumni will wholeheartedly support this initiative and the upcoming webinars. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Gigi. As Dr. Gigi mentioned, we sincerely hope that all of you will support this and similar initiatives. Before I move on, can I request you to mute your audio, everyone, if you are not talking, and when we get a chance to, especially during the question hour session after Chris speaks, you can unmute and talk. But for now, if you could unmute your audio, that would be really helpful. Okay. Now we are moving on to the official inauguration of Inspire CET webinar series. For that, it's my pleasure to invite one of the distinguished alumni of CET, Ajit Kumar. He is from 1972 batch, and he has been a dedicated employee for GE Transportation for more than 40 years. The next fact I'm going to tell you about Ajit will blow your mind. Ajit holds 348 US patents and over 1,000 international patents, and only Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse have more patents than him within GE. Certainly, he is in the exalted company of all these great men, but we are really proud to have such a distinguished CETian with us today. He will talk about his journey from CET to GE and also talk about the applied innovation and research. We also invite him to officially inaugurate the webinar series. Welcome, Ajit Kumar.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I feel privileged and humbled to be invited to be a speaker in this webinar and to inaugurate this webinar. I'll talk about my initial days and how I got to GE, and talk about a couple of examples of things I have done, and maybe talk about what may be coming ahead. This is all from my perspective. So let me share my screen.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I need permission to share.
Permission to share?
Yeah, it's there. We have permission now.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up.
You see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let me talk a little bit about how I got here. As you all know that I joined CET in 68 and graduated in 72. And right after that, I was a lecturer in the college for about 5 months. I quit that job, became a technical officer in a bank because that was a much higher paying job than the lecturer job. After 3 months, I got tired of that one, quit that, took a lower paying job in Keltron. I was among the first few employees of Keltron. That's a research company started by, I think, Kerala government. And I was among the maybe the top first 6 employees of that institution. And from day one, I was trying to get to some higher education, get some higher education in US or England or somewhere else, and been working quite a bit. I wrote to the way I got to Stanford is I wrote to the US Embassy. In those days, there was no email, no phone calls, so it's all postal information. And they gave me a list of 168 institutions in the US. I applied to all of them. took me a lot of time, effort, and spent a lot of money in the post office. And finally, I got to Stanford, finished my MS. Then for a few months, I worked in an institution called NRAO. I think that's a National Radio Astronomy Observatory, which listens to communications, radio communications, and radio output from the stars in the galaxies, far and near. And that also I got bored, joined GE. From there, I spent 43 years with GE. And in between, I got some education in Gannon University, and I taught at the Gannon University. That's my brief history. So let me talk about what I worked on. On the top right, you see a train. So GE Transportation makes the locomotives, not the train, just the locomotives. Those are much bigger than the ones you see in India. It's a 200-ton train, a locomotive. Then we also make trucks, which are shown at the bottom right. Those are bigger than a typical house, maybe a 2-story, 3-storied house. Million-ton operation. So I combined the education from CET I got in power and control, and used the control and computer information I got from Stanford, and used the power conversion methods and techniques for metros, locomotives, off-highway vehicles, and to control the whole train. And my objective has always been performance, and fuel efficiency. So one of the things we want to talk about is R&D, but I spend most of my time in development and very little part in the research portion of it. So that's why I highlighted the D part and not the R part. The only way I'm going to show a couple of examples, 2 of them to be exact. And one of them is a very simple problem I solved. This problem has been around since 1800, 200-year-old problem. And in that respect, you look, the process you follow is you look at it, and there is always problems around you. And most of those problems are opportunities for you to work to solve. And you can look around, you'll see lots of them. This is a 200-year-old problem. When the trains go on track, if the track is slippery, it cannot pull. And during fall, during rainy season, during snowy season, it's always slippery. And trains do stall. So and if you can improve that adhesion, that means you can put more cars in the train, more productivity. So the objective was to improve that pulling power of the locomotive when it's slippery. So sand is the most common used technique. So you put sand on the track and clear the debris. And the way I worked around is when you want to paint, when you want to clean surfaces, the thing you do is sandblast is what it's doing. So we worked around, spent a lot of time looking at various things. Sand was one of them. Walnut shell was another one. We used glass beads. We put high velocity glass beads into the rail to see if it can clean it. And we did some of those tests. So you turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, and look at the pulling power. And after some time, the technician told me that we ran out of sand, but we didn't notice the difference. So just compressed air alone was sufficient to clean the rail. And that's the moment as, okay, that is the solution. Use high velocity compressed air to clean the track. And that was one of my solutions. It doesn't cost anything. There is no material cost allowed other than the compressor and a high velocity system with a nozzle. It took us many, many years to perfect it, but still a very low cost solution. So the controls involved is when do you want to turn it on? When do you want to turn it off? How much pressure should you use? What angle should it be? What height? All kinds of things are needed to finally perfect it. But that was the luck that we got to that solution. Now, once you got to the solution, it brings more problems with it and more opportunities with it. So when you have a solution, you need a market and a customer. Without a market and a customer, if you cannot sell it, it has no value. So in our case, it made about 18,000 kilograms of extra force, which means in a train, you can put 18 more cars. That's the productivity with very little cost added to it. The problems it brought around is when you supply compressed air at a high velocity, if anybody is standing nearby, the pebbles and stones will hit you. So I need solutions for that. We came up with it. And another one which happened is in Australia and other places, during some seasons, there'll be lots of millipedes on the track. If the millipedes are on the track, normally the trains will crush them. It's 30, 40 ton axles going by, 200 axles going on top of it. It crushes them and the rail becomes slippery. With this, we blast the millipedes out of the way. They live and the rail is no longer slippery. That's an opportunity which came along unexpectedly. So it's a simple problem, complex problem, a simple solution. Next, I want to talk about another example. This is a complex problem and a complex solution. And this problem will be there for a long time to come. And therefore, lots of opportunities there too. Around maybe beginning of 2000, the batteries became more and more feasible, like so NiCad batteries, nickel metal hydride batteries, lithium ion batteries. They all started coming around. Practical batteries started coming around 2000. So we built a locomotive. This is a battery attached to it, ran it up and down the track. So this was my project. And we got funding from the Department of Energy to do this. And the problem with batteries is we need to know when to charge, when to discharge. So you need to know what is coming ahead of us. So if it's an uphill coming, you want to don't want to discharge the battery. If it's a long downhill coming, you want to discharge the battery so that you can recover the energy back from the train. So you need to know what is coming ahead of it. So we tried solving that problem. And in between, the battery cost was too high. So commercially, you couldn't sell battery operated locomotives. So what I looked into it, what if you don't have batteries? What can I do with that same problem that you want to go from point A to B? Is there a better way to run the train from point A to B? And so if you look at the trains have a lot of variation. So typical trains are 2,000 to 45,000 tons and all the way to 99,000 tons. It could be 1 to 3 kilometers up to 7 kilometers long. It could use a very small power to power the train, like 0.3 kilowatt per ton. That is trying to run a car with a drill. That's the amount of power the train has. For the weight it has got, this is the amount of power it has got. So I came up with something we call a trip optimizer, which is a plan generation. So if you know how it works is that when the operator gets on board the train, he pushes a button. The information goes to our GE's Waptec server. The server knows which road number the operator pushed the button. It contacts the railroad server, so it knows where the train is going from to, how many cars it has got, what the tonnage of each car, how long is the train, what is the route it's going to take, what is the civil and permanent and temporary speed limits, what the train handling constraints are, how much force it's allowed to have. And once you get that information all on board the train, it has a track map. It generates a plan. It's essentially an optimization problem, a very complex optimization problem to generate a speed and drive the train to that profile. It makes a huge amount of fuel savings. As you can see, it makes of the order of, we saved about 1.1 billion gallons of diesel fuel with that product. So you can see the impact it's drawn, and you can ignore the optimization problem. It runs at various places in the world. So essentially the same technique. This also happened to some extent by luck. We started with the battery. Battery cost was too high. Whatever the solution which was used for the battery, we turned it around and used without the battery and got about 1 billion tons of diesel fuel savings. So you cannot tell when you do a research or when you're development where it's going to end up at. Look for a solution. When I come up with a solution, if the problem moved, find a problem which will solve that. Then, and I want to leave with this one. So the message I have is be persistent, expect lots of failures, accept the failures and move on. And look for new problems or opportunities for the problems you have. And you need a huge amount of teamwork. That is key. It cannot be done by yourself in most of the problems. You need a huge amount of teamwork and support. So the future. This is a picture which I don't think anybody else would have seen so far. The world's first battery-only powered locomotive. It's going to be out next month. So I'm standing inside where the diesel engine used to be. So this looks like a server room. These are all lithium-ion batteries all around. It's a 2.4 megawatt hour battery, huge battery sitting there. And I expect within the next 10 years, you'll see a 10 megawatt hour locomotives. So it's going, demonstration starts next year in California. And it has, as I said, 10,000 plus sensors. The moment you put 10,000 sensors, 20,000 sensors, you can imagine the problem to make it work reliably. So the problem is 10,000 sensors. How do you make it reliably? And that work I have subcontracted or given to Penn State University, and a student from Kerala is doing the research on that. Another one we are looking at is to use drones. There are typically two to three people operating the train. That's a huge cost. One option is to inspect the track right in front of the train. So send a drone from the locomotive, inspect the track, and come back to the locomotive. So it'll be, the charging station will be the locomotive. It goes maybe a mile, maybe half a mile ahead of the train, inspecting the tracks. So you don't need two people. That's one concept. So there is lots of technology needed because it need to go at 70 miles an hour. It need to go and avoid all the obstacles, need to communicate to the operator. That's one. There is another one which we have built. It goes and inspects the train when it comes, bleed the air, connect the air. It's a tedious work, and the climate is not that good, snow and winter and rain. So this is a tedious operation. So it would be nice if the operator could sit either on the side or in the main station and don't have to go and look at every locomotive, connect them together. There is another, when you drive, you'll see signals. The operator has to watch for it. Operator has to watch for the obstacles. You need to analyze the track damage. So this also, I'm working with an alumni from CET to solve that problem. So this is just few of the things which I see coming pretty soon. So anybody with any IT background can have a significant contribution to it. So if you look around, you'll see lots of examples for research. You'll see lots of examples where innovation could be done. So in that respect, I'm extremely happy that my alma mater is inspiring to higher levels through events like this webinar. And I'm sure somebody of the caliber of Dr. Howard will be, with all his financial and business background, should be able to give you a lot more perspective than I could. And with that, and with high pride and great pleasure, I declare this webinar open. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajit, for sharing your life journey and also, inspiring, everybody to, find, sometimes there is simple solution for huge problems. So thank you so much for that advice too. So now I would like to invite Sunil Cherian. a 1989 CSE graduate and a member of CET Alumni Association California chapter. And Sunil is the president and CEO of Copperwire System, a leading blockchain application middleware company that he co-founded with other CET alumni. And he's also the chairman and CEO of Mentor Global, a learning and development focused company, another company that he founded with other CETians. He will introduce and welcome our chief guest and the keynote speaker. Sunil, please go ahead.
Thank you, Anu, for the great introduction. I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Chris Haward from Gartner, who is our keynote speaker. First, let me say a few words about Gartner. It's an organization that's founded in '79. It is the leading research and advisory company. They have expanded beyond the flagship technology research to provide senior leaders across the enterprise with indispensable business insights, advice, and tools they need to achieve the mission critical priorities. Not only do companies listen to Gartner for their advice on what to implement, all the vendors look at Gartner's Magic Quadrant before they do anything, because Gartner sets the trends. I have a quick video on Gartner before I talk about Dr. Howard.
The future doesn't invent itself. It's created by today's business leaders who know that the pace of change will never be this slow again. At Gartner, we work with these leaders every day as they pursue their mission-critical priorities. Seize opportunity from disruption. Cast a vision for the future and build it step by step. We equip them with indispensable insight, advice, and tools to confidently tackle today's challenges and pursue tomorrow's possibilities. Together, we fuel the future of business and a more successful world takes shape.
So a couple of quick highlights about Gartner. They have nearly 17,000 associates worldwide. They are a people business. They're very, very strong in research and analysis. They are in over 100 countries with 14,000 client enterprises that depend on their advice. And the $4.2 billion revenue on S&P 500 and 77% of Global 500 uses the research. As a public company, they're valued at over $13 billion. Chris Haward is Gartner's lead chief of research since last year. In that role, he ensures that Gartner research meets the journal and industry-specific needs of senior executives with emphasis on both technical and business leadership. Mr. Howard leads the Senior Content Leadership Board at Gartner, where he is responsible for the development of integrated topics across all of Gartner's research. In that capacity, he regularly interacts with and advises CEOs, board members, and other senior executives at the world's largest enterprises. Mr. Howard is a compelling speaker, is in demand worldwide for his insights in the intersection of technology and business trends. He has been the featured keynote speaker for Gartner IT Symposium, Expo, CIO forums, and for various gatherings across public sector, oil and gas, financial services, media, and higher education. He draws from his deep background in humanities to engage people in complex topics, including technology, society, artificial intelligence, organizational culture, and business strategy. Prior to this, he ran the industry research relationship between US Bank and Stanford's Media X program and MIT Media Lab. And he brings in neuropsychology, philosophy, computer science, law, medicine, and has served on university boards from Brigham Young and University of Cincinnati, where he was chair of the industry advisory board for the College of Applied Science. Originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, Mr. Howard is a graduate of McGill University and holds a doctoral degree from University of British Columbia. Please welcome Chris to the podium. And audience, if you have any questions, please put them in chat and we will answer them at the end.
Fantastic. Nandi, Sunil, I appreciate that. This is so wonderful to be with you all, such an esteemed group of people, and just humbled to be with you and talking to you today in this inaugural session. So Anu and I have known each other a long time. I was calculating that 17 years, almost 18 years, Anu, since we started working together at the University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, that sounds correct. Yep.
It does, yeah. And so when Anu invited me to do this, of course, immediately I said yes. And as it turns out, I was actually supposed to be in Kochi the week after next. But of course, with our travel restrictions and going all virtual with events, this is the first year in many years that I won't be in India at this time of year. And I'm missing it. So Anu sent to me yesterday an ad that was on the web for this session. And when I saw this, I immediately felt like I was in India. In fact, I felt like I was in Indian television for sure, because of all of the ads around me and so on, which are really well placed, by the way. These are all things that I'm interested in, like the maps on the left-hand side. I buy a lot of Life is Good t-shirts. Some of you will know that I am a classical musician by training, so all of the piano music across the bottom are things that I've bought. But just the feel of that page made me feel like I was right there with some of you that are in India. So I'm missing being there this year. Hopefully next year will be different, but I'm happy to be with you to do this with you today. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want this kind of two parts. And Anu, tell me how much time do I have now? Until about 5 after the top of the hour?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so about 5 after. So there are two things that I want to do. I want to give you a sense of demand out there. So what are boards of directors and CEOs especially saying? Because that serves two purposes. It helps you understand where innovation is needed and research is needed, but it also goes towards placement of current students. So where's the demand space that they're actually moving into? And then the second part of this, I'm going to identify a handful of trends that are really important ones for research emphasis right now. So in the roles that you have currently, in terms of your positions in industry, but also the students that are being prepared right now, I wanted to give you some sense of where I think the most important areas for research are, at least a few of them. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I don't want this to be about COVID, but of course, COVID is the framework for everything that we're thinking right now in business and technology and everywhere around the globe. So just a framing for this really quickly. When crisis happens, you respond immediately. It tends to be triage. It tends to be more chaotic, but eventually that response gives way to recovery. And in recovery, you're looking for those things that are starting to stabilize and maybe become scalable, new ways of getting work done. So new patterns start to emerge. But right now, in many places around the world, we're headed more into a renewal phase. So we're actually looking at what has been permanently changed, what needs to be changed in order to support that. And it's an opportunity for businesses to recalculate their value proposition and their customers and how they're getting product to market, how governments are functioning with transparency, how hospitals and healthcare are providing care sometimes in virtual environments. That will be, some of these things will become more permanent, or even just more people working remotely than ever did before. And so we're really in this transition between recover and renew. And as I was thinking about India, there are some specific things about India that are at play here. And a lot of them have to do with China, interestingly, in that what I see in India are solutions being created and innovation happening very much to create an alternative to Chinese technologies, Chinese applications, and create a made in India momentum. And so that's a really positive thing in terms of the role of innovation within the country. And it's spurred by geopolitical tensions, no question. The other thing too is India becoming even more attractive to a global audience for not just for offshoring, right? This is a long history there, but more about innovation. People coming to India for innovative ideas and thinking as they renew themselves. So this is very much the spirit of the time right now. And there's a psychological aspect to it, which is a good way to frame it, I think. So as humans, we have a set of heuristics that we use to process the world. So we encounter stimulus, we apply patterns to that, and we work out solutions. And that works fine. The brain is very stubborn, doesn't want to change those things until it has to. And what COVID did is it caused us to have to change. There was a breakdown in our assumptions of how to survive as humans, how to survive as businesses, how to function more effectively as governments or health providers. And what happens when things break down is you start to search for new solutions. And I was very, so happy to hear what Ajit was saying in terms of things that are close to you. Look around you. Sometimes the solutions are right there. It's just you've never applied them in that way before. This is exactly what's happening now, is that we are searching, we are innovating, we're trying to find the new set of patterns to apply to the world that we're finding ourselves in. And so you end up with an emergent set of solutions. And this is why the work that you do at CET and throughout the alumni diaspora is so important, is because this is hard. This is very hard to actually assemble a whole new set of heuristics to process the world. That's why what you do is so important. And we see it out there. So Deepali from Wellspun is talking about this rapid innovation, rapid reinvention. And you're starting to get a sense of the importance of analytics and digitization to help drive that reinvention. So better use of data, but also just more digital everywhere. So digital to, again, create new channels, to empower employees in different ways. And it's leading to an upskill for both shop floor employees as well as white collar employees within the corporation. This is a very, very common sentiment that I'm hearing from CEOs right now, is that, yes, this caused us to have to reinvent ourselves. And so the next few minutes, I want to give you some more examples of this and some data. So that's from Wellspun. We do a board of directors survey every year, actually led by Partha Iyengar, who some of you might know. So Partha is our India country manager. He lives up in Pune. And he does a board of directors survey every year that is worldwide. And the thing that came out very clearly from this, we asked them, given COVID-19, how has that affected your digital business initiatives? 70% of them said it's made them go faster. We are accelerating. So this isn't an aspirational thing. This is we are moving faster because we had to in order to survive. So that sets up a dynamic where innovation isn't only necessary, it's welcomed and increasingly funded. And that the funding has been moved from less profitable parts of organizations towards INT to create these types of solutions. And this is true worldwide. So that's really positive. What types of outcomes did they expect? Well, not surprisingly, anything having to do with enhancing customer value. So engaging more deeply with customers, generating more value for them. And by customer, read, it might be a customer, it might be a student, it might be a patient or a citizen, anybody that's receiving the value of that you're creating as an entity. There's also some optimization here. So more business through digital channels, cost reduction, so using digital techniques to drive costs out of the environment. It's a significant piece of that. And then the last one, building tighter ecosystem partners and platforms. What this means is that they're revisiting who they're working with to create a value proposition. And this means a more aggressive look at startups and entrepreneurs and looking into the ecosystem for creative ideas to help them move faster. And so what I'm seeing in India is actually a real momentum for the startup community that's kind of tied with the Made in India, but also the Digital India initiatives, and the move towards more regionalized centers for innovation and bringing more people into the creation of solutions. This creates an enormous opportunity for entrepreneurs in the country, and to do things that it's easier for a smaller company to do and then become plugged into an ecosystem. So some positive signals from above. How's this playing out? So GSK India, so Sridhar is talking about this digital medium for customer connect engagement. And everything moving faster. So he's acknowledging things have accelerated significantly and mostly around customers. So from GlaxoSmithKline, it's a statement of truth. They're experiencing everything got fast forwarded. What this means practically is that many organizations were doing some of these things before, just not at scale. So they might have been experimenting or they were piloting, and what COVID did is it pushed those pilots into production, or it killed them entirely. Because it's not all about making everything move faster. It's about selecting the things that create value and making them move faster, and getting rid of some of the dead wood in the portfolio as well. So turning some things off, which GSK also did. What about UTI? So you're starting to see not only optimization of cost, but actually using their digital strategy as a talent attractor, which I thought was really an interesting perspective here, and then using the young Indian talent to build these new creative solutions. And he talks specifically about health and pharma, where India has significant play, right? So I mentioned Partha, who lives in Pune. Well, of course, Pune is one of the centers for vaccine production. And the ability for India to participate in the revival of the global economy is really, really strong. But it's going to have to be done at a scale that we've never done before, that we've never experienced before, from a production point of view, from a distribution point of view, even just from a vaccine creation point of view. The use of AI and machine learning to make all of that move faster is something that we need to look at. So yes, it's great that there's a history of pharmaceutical production in Pune and other parts of India, but how can you make it even better? I mean, what can you apply engineering skills to make the things that India already does well even better? That's the challenge I would put in front of you. Okay, and since I'm Canadian, I threw a Canadian example in here. So this is from RBC, Dave McKay, who's a friend of mine. We did a lot of conversations, sort of deep conversations together. And so this is around the digital platforms. And so what you see in financial services is the increased digitalization and automation of digital platforms in order to create products and get them out to people. Digital first is defining that economy. And what's in here is a lot of advanced data and analytics, a lot of machine learning and machine models driving this. But platform is the important word here, and you'll understand what I mean by this. Is a platform is something that makes it easy to do hard things. And that is what you all do. You are involved in building platforms that make it easier to do difficult things. And many of the things that we want to do in this experimentation phase, when things are all broken up, they're hard, they're new. People are really excited, but they can get frustrated quickly. You know, I've been involved in AI for a long time, and people believe it to be something that it's not. And when it's not those things, they get frustrated and say, well, this, you know, that it doesn't have value, because they expect to be able to drop an AI technology into a complex problem and have it just do everything. And the truth is that AI is really great at narrow AI use cases where you can train a model, you can reinforce that model, you can put it into production quickly, you can actually get results fairly fast. And this will ultimately build up to a higher level functioning AI set of technologies, but we're just at the beginning of that story. Okay, so how are CEOs thinking about what's happening as they restart? So they're being cautious necessarily, mostly because we don't know how the virus is going to act. We have some sense of different models and so on, but you know, here in the US, we're experiencing sort of another wave. Certainly across Europe, we're seeing that, and in Canada as well. India, not so much yet. In fact, it's going the other direction. But what hasn't happened in India is it hasn't penetrated the very rural communities yet. And I hope it doesn't, because that's going to be a catastrophic situation, similar to Africa. So I've spent a fair amount of time with the WHO for Africa, and their concern about delivering remote care to the most rural parts of the continent. A similar situation in India. And so the ability to deliver virtual healthcare as needed at scale that's an engineering problem. And the problem, of course, with that is that we don't have great infrastructure to deliver that in India. I mean, there's the effort to lay fiber throughout the rural communities, but like so many infrastructure projects in India, it moves really slowly. And so that's a place where we just have to make things move faster in order to keep people alive. It's that dire. But most CEOs are saying we're feeling this acceleration, but also a rebirth. We want to reimagine who we are and reset ourselves in that way. So a couple of examples from that. So this is from Volkswagen. Volkswagen has made a top-level change in their thinking that they are no longer a car manufacturer, they are a technology company. And it's based on the truth is that people, especially younger people, don't want to own a car. They want mobility, they want to get around, but they want to do it without actually having to own the asset. And so what does that mean for car manufacturers? It means that you're using information, especially to understand what people need when they need it, and to be able to provide subscription-based services to mobility as opposed to asset-based purchases of vehicles. And so that's a pretty major shift, and it's a potentially very threatening one, because that takes an incumbent business model and turns it upside down. So we'll see. I'm not sure what Tata Motors is doing. I meant to look before we started this, but I know that many of the car manufacturers are feeling the same way. It's that existential, that's significant for these companies to say we need to be something different. All right, so we're going to shift into technologies now. When you ask the board of directors or the CEOs, they don't talk about many technologies, but the one that they do talk about is AI. And the opportunity that we have here is to, well, okay, that's exciting. I mean, that's an innovative space. The challenge is that these executives don't really understand what AI is. They believe they know what it is, and they're passionate about it, and that's great. And I don't mean to disparage that, but it's our role to help clarify what it is and what it isn't, what it can do, what it can't do, and how it should be most effectively used. The other thing about AI, when you see it at this level, is it means basically everything. It means data, it means advanced analytics, it means everything from that through to dynamic neural networks and GANs and these types of techniques. And so there's an education opportunity as well as an implementation opportunity there. But CIOs are also rebalancing investment. This is new data that was just released this week. Pay attention to the darker blue bar, in which India is included. I don't have enough sample size within India right now to do anything that's more country specific. It would be mostly directional. But APAC is a pretty good representation of what's happening there. And where APAC is doing more than the rest of the world is in cloud services and solutions. And so this is as both a provider for external needs, but it's also an alternate to Chinese cloud centers. People meaning large multinationals, looking to diversify the geographic placement of compute, and India becoming a stronger option for that as part of their geographical mix. And so that's how I read this. But you see the technologies here, and I'm happy to see cyber and information security at the top of this list for reasons that you'll see in just a couple of minutes. Okay. Every year we do a collection of top 10 strategic technologies. And we've just released the second one of these. It just came out yesterday, so I decided not to use that, but to use this one, which is from a few months earlier. Some of them are very similar. These tend to shift every 3 to 5 years. We sort of deepen the research on them. But this is the set of things from last year. And what I wanted to do is to pick out a couple of things. And I just built this out so you can see it. So what I did is once COVID hit, I thought, well, are these still applicable? And yes, they are. And the red text are the ways that they're applicable in a COVID and post-COVID environment. So for example, distributed cloud. So this is exactly that geographic workload placement I just talked about with cloud, where we want more flexible movement of workload based on policy that we can enforce, but also that we can move around as things get disrupted. It was really hard to do that when COVID struck. So in the same way that physical supply chains broke, information supply chains broke as well. And we need to get much more disciplined around container-based architectures and Kubernetes and other things in order to make workload truly portable. And so that's what I mean about going from just distributed cloud to why it's even more important now. What I want to do is take a few of these and talk about them. So I'm going to talk about hyperautomation, multi-experience, transparency, traceability, and AI security are the ones that I'm going to pick, because these are the ones that empower what I've just talked about for the last 15 minutes. So if I want if I want to drive friction out of my environment, I need to automate more of it. If I want to engage more deeply with customers and employees, then I need to build out a multi-experience environment. If I'm using AI to make sophisticated algorithmic decisions, then I need traceability into those decisions so I know how they were made. And then if I'm building out these sophisticated models, I need to know what the bad actors are doing and how to protect against that. So that's where I want to focus and just kind of quickly go through these for the next 10 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about hyperautomation. Automate everything that can be automated. And the number one use case for AI is process automation. And it starts with RPA. So many of you have been involved with this. Most of the clients I'm working with have been doing this for a long time. I don't really want to say that RPA is artificial intelligence. I mean, what it does is it mimics human behavior in terms of data entry, essentially. But that's not where you should stop. So, if you're doing RPA but not rebuilding processes, then you're missing an opportunity. You should be redesigning process and automate the best of those. But don't stop there. You're trying to move up this stack. And there are a whole set of technologies like intelligent BPMS, for example, that are doing autonomous process discovery and tuning. They're functioning in real time. They're self-modifying, so they're improving the more that they learn. That's what hyperautomation really is. But it is orchestrated down through the system, so you can find these levels of automation in various places. Most of our clients are in the process automation box on this graph. There are a few that are starting to orchestrate across different functions, very few that are doing the ecosystem part of this. But the ecosystem piece, so this is sort of multiple entities working together in a massively automated form. This is how you would describe what Gartner calls the digital dragons. So these are the giant digital native companies like Amazon, like Alibaba, like Baidu and others. The only way that or Ant Financial, which is part of that whole system, the only way that they can reach the scale they have is because they're doing this hyperautomation. And there are almost no humans involved in any of this. So for Ant Financial, for example, they have almost 2 billion customers and only 10,000 employees. And it will never be more than 10,000. They don't need people. They need people to do things that people do well, but the system takes care of everything else. That's where we're headed. When you're looking at where to place it, you find RPA and AI throughout the entire system. So it's not just at the screen level UI, but it's also down in the movement of data amongst legacy systems. So you're finding AI and RPA. So AI might be used to actually do character recognition of files coming out of these systems, which are then input into the RPA system to be automated from there. But, and I'm sure that Ajit will recognize this, there are a lot of old pieces of hardware out there in the field that are not digitally connected to anything. So what do? You stick a camera in front of it, you use OCR and image recognition to actually pull that data back into these systems and pump them into an automated stream. So there's a whole lot going on here, and it's not as simple as just RPAing the humans out of the scenario, but looking for any place where you have text that can be moved around, data that can be moved around, and it's part of a higher level mediation environment. Okay, multi-experience. So this is all of the types of capabilities that more cognitive computing can bring, the types of interfaces that we're building, and so on. This has accelerated for one very obvious reason, in that people don't want to touch anything right now. So we're afraid to touch an ATM machine. Here in the United States, coins are out of circulation. There's a shortage of coins because people aren't handling currency. More gestural interfaces, conversational interfaces, they're moving very, very quickly. And so there's a whole lot of really interesting research that could be done around creating this multi-experience. All right, so the track of this has been, it's a user experience track that is based on how do I want to interact with systems. It's becoming more immersive and much more sensory. But the systems underneath it and the techniques to architect it against are where the opportunities are for research. So this ties in ideas like edge computing, because you're moving compute out to where people are. And this is one of the fascinating things of the last several years, is we have decoupled the relationship between what gets computed and where it gets computed. And that creates so many interesting possibilities for where you would architect intelligence into the system, and to be able to interact with me with whatever devices I would choose to use, and then collecting information and creating an immersive environment from that. So it's all, it's all of these new techniques working together to create a more human experience, which is so important if we are persisting in a more remote kind of work environment and just a remote engagement environment. So we see it happening in many of the industries that you're involved in. And so use of augmented and mixed reality to create collaborative asset management scenarios. It's for training, used heavily in training for simulation. service. So if I'm a technician in the field, it's giving me directed information about how to repair things, or even overlaying it into a retail environment, in this case for allergies. So if I have a nut allergy, what this does is it actually overlays the risk of these products in front of me. So this is what I mean about a fully immersive experience. We see other things happening with emotion detection, and especially in call centers. And so if a caller calls into a call center and is obviously upset, the system can understand that they're upset by tone, choices of words, that kind of thing, and route them to a human that is especially well equipped to deal with an emotional customer. But what happens is that then that transaction closes and the system learns whether that was an effective closure of the problem, and it actually gets better at directing the incoming calls to different types of experts, but all based on the ability to pick up emotion from the incoming caller. This is a more humanized kind of experience. So it is multisensory and multimodal, using so many of these techniques and technologies mixed together. And I know that CET is in the middle of many of these, figuring out how to bring these to life and to use these in scenarios. And especially, again, as I said, because humans are working in much more distributed virtual environments, the ability to actually have a more sensitive environment for them is really, really essential to keep them engaged with each other, with our businesses, with our schools, and so on. Okay, so as an example, just to break this out for an example here, we see this in a lot of companies. This happens to come from Ulta. So Ulta is a cosmetics company, and before the pandemic, they were going full into digital to create these augmented reality experiences. And so, you could replicate the experience of being in a shop and trying on different makeups or, hair colors or whatever, but it's all done within the app. So being the good researcher that I am, I decided to try it. Okay, so this is me. And I thought, like many of you, I'm getting tired of my pandemic haircut and needed something different. And so I gave it a run, and sure enough, it works really well. It actually does a great job identifying the hair, but also keeping the texture and so on. And I'm not going to get green hair, so don't worry about that. But I could easily if I wanted to. The thing that's interesting about this, though, is I'm not sure what happened to my picture. So they use an image of me because I let it, and it takes the picture, but I'm not sure where that's stored. How else might that get used? And so there's a convenience and ethics piece in there that I'm not going to talk a whole lot about today, but it's a really important area for research, is the ethical use of information, especially as we do more immersive things with facial recognition, with emotion detection and so on, is that we're treating that information in an ethical way. And that's kind of what this next topic is about. So this would be explainable AI, traceability, and transparency, because AI by its nature would tend to amplify biases. Because humans program it, humans reinforce it, and to some extent it still encapsulates the biases that we have, unless you have very diverse modeling sources and so on. And so this is an area for continued work. Because there is a crisis of trust out there. How is my data being used? The rise of deep fakes, for example, even just basic cyber attacks, which are on the rise. But it's the kind of thing that if I use a system like this to make a life and death decision about a person, or even something that's not as life and death, like a lending decision, can I trace back to understand why they might have been declined for the loan, or how choices might have been made about what services to provide to what patient, and so on. So there are things that we want to get better at, but in doing that, we might actually trip an ethical rule. And this is happening at a time when these regulations are fragmented at best. And so we have a role as a tech community, as an engineering community, to be aware of this, to mitigate it, but also to teach the regulators. That's a really important role of CET, is to teach the regulators what is possible, where the risks are, and so that we're ahead of that in the game, and no better organization within India to do this. For a few reasons. One is that anytime you connect a bunch of these bots together, bad things can happen. So one could be working with a fake identity and could be poisoning the rest. There may be decisions being made that are right in one context but wrong in another. So, I'm onboarded in a new employee, and I'm asking to get it set up with email, but at the same time, it actually grants me access to a system that I shouldn't have access to. Those types of things, they happen and they seem innocuous, but at scale, they're really enormous. Another thing that we know is that these, in an unsupervised learning situation, these systems do things that we don't completely understand. So they'll actually get to answers and solutions in ways that we're not sure how they did. So the Go example, if you remember from a few years ago, where the computer became the best Go player ever, nobody really knows how. Nobody really knows how it did that. There's maybe a funner example here, and this comes from language teaching. So you're teaching a machine language. Generally, it means you get to about an 80% proficiency level, and it's hard to go beyond that. So one of the companies that might be obvious from the image I've chosen here experienced this in their research lab. So they're teaching it English, and then they teach it another language, okay? And what's interesting about this is that the more of your language they taught this system, the better the English became. Now that's kind of weird, isn't it? It's a little creepy, but what's happening here is that the system is creating an intermediate language that helps it learn other languages. So it's not being proxied through English, it's being proxied through an interlingua that the machine actually created for itself to learn any language, which is much more based on patterns than anything else. I find that fascinating. It's a little scary, but it's actually happening within systems that are dynamic neural network systems generally. And then the generative adversarial networks are a step beyond that. And so we need to understand how these work. Okay, so the last bit of this, and I know I'm just running just a little bit long, but I'll finish up real fast.
Hey, Chris, it's okay. You can take a few more minutes.
Okay, so AI, so all of that said about this example and others, is that we need to actually develop AI-based security protections because the bad actors are already there. They are there and doing bad things that I'll identify here for us. What concerns me is that if I go to the average enterprise board, they'll tell me, oh, we're spending a lot on security. But the question is, well, are you getting the protection you expected from that money that you're spending? And the truth is not really, because they're spending on things they understand, which are more physical controls, perimeter-based controls, the security patterns that solve the problems of the past. And those problems still exist. I mean, there's still sandworm-style attacks against physical systems all the time. And Ajit, I don't know whether that's happening to locomotives, but I suspect it is, right? Because anywhere there's a physical digital overlay in the environment, attackers want to get into that thing. Hospitals, unfortunately, have been a high attack surface for ransomware because hospitals will pay anything to keep their respirators running. And the bad actors know this. And so you can get into the HVAC systems of a hospital and shut them down, which is catastrophic for humans. So there's these kinds of attacks going on. And so I'm going to map a little bit of this out here. So the security techniques on the left-hand side, some of the regular ones that we expect are up at the top, but the techniques of the bad actors are on the right-hand side. And so there is adversarial machine learning happening. And so this is deliberate attacks against the machine learning that you were developing. So this would be model poisoning, for example. This would be injection of biased data into data sets and so on. So that's happening during the machine learning development. But there's actually stuff happening at real time too. So you can actually encode an audio message for a conversational interface that sounds like regular English or whatever language, but hidden inside that is a coded audio language that you as a human can't pick up, but that's in fact what the machine responds to. Or you could have a fake phone call from your CEO asking for a wire transfer of some amount of money, and you're convinced that it's them, but it's in fact a faked version of them. So there's runtime level nefarious machine learning use as well. This is it's from an academic point of view, fairly well understood. From an enterprise implementation point of view, not very well understood. So this is an enormous opportunity for continued research, but also implementation advice about how to protect systems. So for example, if I have a generative adversarial network attacking my systems, it would probably be best to defend with a generative adversarial network. to actually engage it in a different game and draw it off, to sequester it into some other environment. Oh, sorry about the dogs. I knew they wouldn't last. So it's that kind of thing. I want research around possibility there. Okay, so to summarize it then, so COVID's caused a redesign of business models aggressively. Things are accelerating to support these initiatives, and as that happens, risk is increasing. You see that AI has been used to underlie many of these innovations. So there's an opportunity to define what AI is, to clarify what it is, and to determine narrow use cases, like the ones I've talked about, but then how narrow use cases combine into more complex use cases. And then the research that's really needed to advance the state of the art, applied AI, exactly what I just said, the hyperautomation piece of this, which ties to human augmentation, which is cognitive, yes, but increasingly physical augmentation, and all of these advanced security techniques that I've mentioned here. So these are the opportunities. And just to close it out, I'm going to, this woman, some of you may know, so Bonnie Henry is the head of public health for the province of British Columbia, who's been a real true leader in the midst of COVID. And despite all the fancy technical stuff that I've walked through, I think this really is the key. And especially for India, as you regroup and reinvent the Indian, the Indian country, as you're thinking about what does India become for the rest of this century? Well, it's, yes, there's trying to keep the curve flat, but it's really about the human-to-human interaction, staying committed to each other as the CET diaspora spreads, as India tries to do more made in India, digital India, and bring more people into solution making. It's the collective that's going to make that work, like all of you here on this call. It's the collective that will take us forward. So hopefully that's been inspiring for you. I think we have a few minutes for questions, Anu, so I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful and inspiring talk. I can see that, each of the point that you mentioned, you can talk about it for hours. It's
yes.
all like,
yeah.
It's definitely inspiring, especially to put everything into context in the Indian context and the educational aspect of it. So hopefully all the CETians who are in the call can think about, ways for them to work together and contribute towards, some of the, really nice ideas that you were talking about. So now, we have some time to ask some questions to Chris. And I see one from Shaji. Shaji, do you want to unmute and talk and ask the question yourself, or I can just read off the chat?
Yeah, my question is around identity, digital identity protection. So is there more companies investing in identity theft prevention, identity management? And I also think there is a necessity on awareness or on keeping your identity safe. So what do you see in industry?
Yeah, thanks for that, Shaji. In fact, it's one of the new trends in the next version of what I showed you is architected identity protection, and actually the use of alternate chip technologies to actually push some of the identity management down into the silicon itself with some alternative chip ideas. And it's not something, honestly, I know a lot about, but it's really about sort of architecting the protection in terms of the device that I'm using. The other things that I'm seeing are much more biometric identity management. And so, and it's not just fingerprints and iris scans and things like that, but rather about how I hold and use a device like a phone. Does this appear to be held and moved and positioned and tapped on like I normally do? Because that is a physical signature of identity. And so we have to get better, we have to develop these types of technologies that aren't so reliant on the user to be the protector of their identity, but rather the systems that they're using to know them in a much more, very specific way, so that it's protecting them. But you're right about people's sense of their sense of protection about their identity, and I think it's actually it's a slightly wider issue than that. So yeah, we have issues of identity theft. We're much more aware of how exposed we are in the online world. And often that's by our choice to expose ourselves because it actually brings us some kind of value. The challenge comes when you have a data relationship with a provider and they break that trust. So, for example, this is what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So they were using Cambridge as a data processing partner, but actually they ended up breaking the promises that Facebook had made to its consumers. And so that inheritance of third-party risk is something that most organizations are actually starting to look at more carefully now, because identity flows throughout the entire system, and there needs to be much more policy-driven checks at the points of interface than we have now. But we've got some great work there on the identity team that I have, but it's really this identity fabric, bringing it down into the chip architecture, more biometric identification, and just general. What I'd love to see is that the person is more in charge of their persona and how that gets exposed in the midst of different transactions. So more persona based than just identity based. That's a really hard problem to solve. When I was last year, I had the chance to have a couple of long conversations with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, and we talked about exactly this problem. And there is some new work going on in terms of like persona repositories that could be used. I think we have to reinvent identity generally, and I'm just not sure how to do that. So you all can help with that, okay? You can help me with that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see like a couple more questions. One question from Madhav Kaliyat is asking, so how can India prepare itself for technologies that have not been developed, not yet been developed? Because, it implies that, India is kind of, as an economy, it kind of catches up slowly. So
yeah,
where do you see, how can India prepare itself for, technologies to come?
Right. Yeah. This is a common question with my Indian clients, but also the African clients I'm working with, and so on. There's similar issues in terms of just infrastructure and the structure of, like we talked about earlier. The other thing about India, though, I think is there has been a certain expectation about the kind of work that India would do, and whether India was actually a center for innovation, or was it just a place to put stuff that I decided I wanted to offshore. And I think the legacy of that gives you the perception of moving more slowly than you actually do, right? Just in my experience in working with Indian companies, there's some of the most innovative people that I've met. And I know a lot of folks from the Valley that, were from Chennai, for example, and, went and made money in the Valley and then moved back and then start their businesses back again. And they essentially have leapfrogged. So I think the opportunity for India is to think about, well, how do I actually break the continuum and do some new things with technology that only could be done here or have to be done here because of some of these limitations. So it's more a constraint-based innovation mindset. Well, because we don't have great connectivity into rural areas, what else could we do? What has to be true there? The other thing too, of course, is you have an enormous opportunity with alternative energies there, and with the enormous amount of land that you have, moving into wind or innovations in other forms of alternative energy is a giant thing, especially at the time when the oil major companies are trying to reposition themselves into alternative energy. Then if India has something to say there and something to add there, then that creates a relationship with these companies that have a lot of money to spend to do it. So just a couple of ideas. I think it's, first of all, is just believing that you can. Believing that India is a place of rich innovation and many, many smart people. And I would go back to something that Ajit said earlier, which is that there's all this potential swimming around us. And the innovations will come from recombinations of those innovations to something that nobody's ever thought of before. And so you need to provide the kind of platform for that to happen educationally, from a technology point of view, and just from a community point of view.
So with respect to, CET being an educational institution, I got a question, before the webinar started, like what skill sets are important for graduating technologists to acquire to prepare them for the workplace?
Yeah, I tried to actually center the second half of the talk on some of those technologies. But so let's just kind of do a bit of a list. So anything having to do with applied AI. So machine learning, model development, model runtimes, use of cognitive computing, anything that is providing an alternative interface into value, all of those types. So user experience, customer experience, that whole set of related techniques is so essential. Anything having to do with IoT, and Ajit had that in one of his slides, the last slide that he showed. Sort of anybody that has an IoT background, there's an enormous amount of opportunity to put sensors all over the world, essentially, to be able to instrument the world for higher productivity and greater value creation. So IoT skills, data analytics, essential skills. Everybody wants them. Data science skills are harder to find than they should be. So data science skills, decision science skills, all of that. The harder question is, what should people stop training for? To what extent are we continuing to do sort of deep infrastructure level training or chip design training and those types of things? As I think wherever there's a potential for commoditization out into an existing scalable market, I'd rather be teaching the majority of students how to use that to do something higher level, right? So, and it's the same way, how much networking technology if you're not going to be a networking expert, then how much networking knowledge do you really need to have in order to do some of the things that we're talking about? So there's definitely a rebalancing there. The hard thing is that if you create a syllabus for a student coming in as a first-year student, what they need to know by the time they come out is completely changed, because the technology world around us is changing so quickly. So it's being in step. I would start applied work soon. So like when we at UC, I knew a lot of that happened in senior year. We should be giving students the opportunity within their first semester to be actually doing some more of that applied work, because that's how they're going to learn. Yeah.
With CET, there are some systemic, kind of restriction, but those are some of the innovations that the CET alumni can kind of drive to make, be the driver. So that's a bigger, larger conversation to be, to happen in the future. Yeah.
I think one other thing, Anu, just finish that thought. A lot of the higher ed institutes that I work with are struggling with this in terms of moving away from the diploma or the certification as the artifact, and more towards a bursted learning, micro-credentials, badging people for specific skills so they can learn and apply right away, and then assembling sort of their total degree program based on that assembly of skills. It's a very different model, but it also enables you to train people throughout their life, not just within the time that they're a student. It's lifelong learning through bursted learning. So there may be something there as well that CET should be looking at, if you're not already.
Then I have this beautiful question from Moideen. Would you like to go ahead and ask, or I can just paraphrase and ask the question, maybe the last part? Okay, maybe I will go ahead and ask. His question, he has some preface for that, but he's asking, what is more important? Is it that the human shall become more reliant on technology, or human shall become more humane? I know, Chris, you would like to answer that.
It's true. You know me too well. Yeah, well, so it goes back to my earlier days of, when I was at Stanford, and I was working there, through the banks and doing research with them and so on. As I became friends with, some of the people that were doing the AI research there, and we would have these discussions about what's the point? What is the philosophical point of doing AI? Initially, it was the thought experiment of, could we make computers do what humans do and create parity between the two? And that's an interesting goal, but it's the wrong one. What we should be doing, and what we have been doing, is making machines do well what they really do well and what they're meant to do well, which is ingest tons and tons of information, find patterns in that, and then spit out options, for example, is one. Or to run hypotheses at scale, which humans could never do in a matter of seconds. What that does is it is a cognitive offload from the human. And what it's doing is actually taking from the human what they're not well designed to do in the first place. So what humans are meant to do is to be the sort of the empathic side of the compute relationship is to understand the implications of decisions and to train models to be more humane, which seems like a bit of an oxymoron. But their role is more important than it ever has been in terms of making technology serve the needs of the world, of human beings, of the climate, of society in general. And if you take humans out of that loop, then machines will they'll optimize their learning, but the whole piece of empathy and connection is gone from that. And so the answer is that done right, this will allow humans to be more human. And that's the goal. It's for humans to be more human, machines to be more machine. And that honestly has been the role of technology for tens of thousands of years. This is no different.
We have a lot of questions, but I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions. But you can follow Chris on, I don't know, maybe in LinkedIn or other places, social media, so you would get to see what he's up to and all the wonderful thing that Gartner and he's spearheading.
Yep.
So
and you should feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help. It's a nice diversion, to be honest, from my regular time of managing 3,000 analysts every day. So it's good. And I'm going to put my email in the chat here. So if you're interested, you can grab it.
Yeah.
And reach out to me.
And Chris, I'm sure that the CET principal and everybody associated with CET would be, are thankful that you said that, because we can use your insight in terms of curriculums and programs for
Absolutely.
the future and things like that. Or maybe when you said you were planning to come to Kerala, right? So we would definitely.
Well, as I said, our IT symposium event has moved to Kochi for the foreseeable future. So
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so
Wonderful.
we'll be back next fall for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully, at that time you can come to CET in person and we can have a conversation.
I would love that. That would be fantastic. Yes.
Okay, that's great. So, as I said, sorry that I couldn't get to all the questions, but everybody have limited time. So at this time, I would really like to thank Chris for the inspiring talk and also being so open and taking a lot of time. We can see that you put too much into that that talk and slides, even some Malayalam there. So we are really thankful for your support of our effort. And and also I would really love to thank Ajit for joining in kind of short notice and giving valuable insights and advice to all of us. And hopefully we can arrange a longer talk from you. And I would really like to thank Dr. Gigi, the principal of CET, for his leadership throughout. We had multiple meetings, through a couple of weeks. And thank you. We thank him for being open to, these kind of ideas and, putting all the resources behind it. And we would like to, thank other CET faculty, mainly Dr. Ashalada and Dr. Jayashree, Dr. Jisha, Dr. Abhilash Suryan. They all worked a lot in planning and executing this program. And I also would like to thank Dr. Madhavan Ganesh, who is the president of CET Alumni Association. And a big thank you to an appreciation to Tarun Udayraj from 2014 batch. He was in charge of the marketing and all the wonderful flyers that you have seen. He worked with another alumni, Sham from CBS, to design all those. And I would like to thank a couple of other people, especially the CET Alumni Association marketing team, Lata Hariharan from 1898 batch, and Deepa Karta, who have her own application, Journeys application. He helped, he allowed us to use that application to track our progress. And there is another special person, if you can spotlight Anu Koshi Tarun. She's from 1999 batch, and she deserves all the kudos because she kept us on track and managed all the details. Thank you, Anu, and we really appreciate your effort. And our sincere gratitude to all of you who joined us and supported this initiative. And hope you all keep engaged with our efforts here. And until next time, stay safe and see you soon. And Chris, once again, thank you a lot. And we will keep in touch and take care.
Shukriya, Nandi.
Thank you. All right. Talk to you sometimes, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know that, it took a lot of
Nope.
your time.
It's exactly.